Assalamu alaikum. Welcome, dear students, to the biology classroom. In activity 1, we've learned that during inhalation, the inhaled air travels through the respiratory passages till it reaches the lungs, where it circulates through bronchioles, which are branches of bronchi. After the travel through bronchioles, the air reaches the alveoli, where it will exchange some gases with the blood found in the blood capillaries. In activity 3, we will identify the respiratory gases, define diffusion, and explain the gas exchange at the level of the lungs and at the level of the organs of the body. First, I want you to observe document A, page 42 in your book. In this document, we have an alveolus in contact with the blood capillary. This is the alveolus and this is the blood capillary. Let's correct the comparisons that you have done in your homework. I'll start by comparing the composition of the inhaled air and the exhaled air. The quantity of nitrogen in the inhaled air is 79 milliliters, equal to that in the exhaled air, which is 79 milliliters also. What can you conclude from this comparison? Okay, nitrogen is not involved in respiration, so it is not a respiratory gas. Let's now compare the quantity of O2 in the inhaled air to that in the exhaled air. The quantity of O2 in the inhaled air is 21 milliliters, more than that in the exhaled air, which is 16 milliliters. We notice that there is 5 milliliters of O2 that disappeared from the alveolar air. Where do you think these 5 milliliters of O2 pass? Maybe they pass into the blood. Now we will compare the quantity of CO2. The quantity of CO2 in the inhaled air is 0.03 milliliters, less than that in the exhaled air, which is 5 milliliters. We notice that there is appearance of about 5 milliliters of CO2 in the alveolar air. Where do you think these 5 milliliters of CO2 come from? Maybe they are collected from the organs of the body by the blood. Let's now compare the composition of the blood entering the lungs to that in the blood leaving the lungs. Remember, the blood entering the lungs is the blood collected from all the organs of the body, while the blood leaving the lungs is the blood that will be distributed to all the organs of the body. Look, the quantity of O2 in the blood entering the lungs is 15 milliliters, less than that in the blood leaving the lungs, which is 20 milliliters. So there is appearance of 5 milliliters of O2 in the blood leaving the lungs. Then the 5 milliliters of O2 that disappeared from the alveolar air pass into the blood. What about CO2? The quantity of CO2 in the blood entering the lungs is 53 milliliters, more than that in the blood leaving the lungs, which is 49 milliliters. We notice that in the lungs, the blood loses about 4 milliliters of CO2. Then, the quantity of CO2 that appears in the alveolar air is approximately equal to the quantity of CO2 that disappeared from the blood. So, CO2 passes from the blood coming from all the organs of the body into the alveolar air. From document A, we can conclude that nitrogen is not a respiratory gas, oxygen and carbon dioxide are the two respiratory gases, the human body takes O2 and releases CO2. But how do the respiratory gases move from one medium to another? This takes place by diffusion. Let me now tell you what's the meaning of diffusion. In this document, we have two media. The first one has a high concentration in a substance, while the other has a low concentration in the same substance. Surely, the particles, which are represented in blue, will move from the medium of high concentration to the medium of low concentration. This movement of particles is called diffusion. Look, after diffusion, the two media have approximately equal concentrations. So, diffusion is the movement of particles of a substance from a medium of high concentration or pressure to a medium of low concentration or pressure. Now, we will explain the gas exchange that takes place in the lungs. Remember that this exchange occurs at the level of alveoli. This is one alveolus in contact with a blood capillary. In this picture, the pink particles represent oxygen gas, while the blue particles represent carbon dioxide. Look at this side of the picture. Where is the concentration of O2 greater? In the blood entering the lungs or in the alveolus? What can you conclude? The concentration of O2 in the alveolus is greater than that in the blood entering the lungs. Then, we can conclude that O2 will diffuse from the alveolus to the blood. Look at this side of the picture again. Where is the concentration of CO2 greater? Then draw out a conclusion. The concentration of CO2 in the blood entering the lungs is greater than that in the alveolus. Then, CO2 will diffuse from the blood to the alveolar air. Look now at the other side of the picture. After the gas exchange between the blood and the alveolar air, the blood leaves the lungs to feed all the organs of the body. In the lungs, this blood enriches in O2. This means that it becomes rich in O2 and it impoverishes in CO2. This means that it becomes poor in CO2. Now, I'm going to tell you some characteristics of the alveoli of the alveolar wall that favor the gas exchange with the blood. The alveolar wall is thin. It is permeable, which means that it allows the passage of some substances through it, and it is coated with a moist film. After leaving the lungs, the blood, which is enriched with oxygen gas, will be pumped by the heart to feed all the body organs. So now I'm going to discuss with you the gas exchange that takes place in the organs. Remember that your body organs are made up of tissues, which in turn are made up of cells. To function properly, these cells need the consumption of oxygen gas. Now, I want you to observe document D in your book, page 43. This document shows the pressures of O2 and CO2 in the blood entering the organs and in the cells. Compare the pressure of O2 in the blood entering the organ to that in the cells, then draw out a conclusion. The pressure of oxygen in the blood entering an organ is 98 to 100 mm of mercury, greater than that in the cells, which is 30 mm of mercury or less. Then O2 will diffuse from the blood to the cells. Now compare the pressure of CO2 in the blood entering the organ to that in the cells, then draw out a conclusion. The pressure of CO2 in the blood entering an organ is 40 mm of mercury, less than that in the cells, which is 50 mm of mercury. So CO2 will diffuse from the cells to the blood. Here is a schematic representation that explains the gas exchange at the level of tissues. Here is the blood coming from the lungs to the organ. It's rich in O2, so O2 diffuses into the cells that need this gas to function properly. On the other side, CO2, which is produced by the cells, diffuses into the blood that will leave the organ to travel into the lungs. The characteristics that favor the gas exchange at the level of tissues are richness of your organs in blood capillaries, so there is a large surface area of exchange, the thinness of the wall of capillaries, and the slow circulation of blood in the capillaries. Look at document 43, at document E, page 43 in your book. We notice that oxygen gas diffuses from the blood to the cells across the lymph, which is a liquid that bathes the cells, and CO2 diffuses from the cells to the blood across the lymph also. As a summary, we can say that the respiratory gas exchange takes place in the lungs at the level of alveoli and in the organs at the level of cells. From the lungs, the blood takes the necessary quantity of oxygen to distribute it to all the organs of the body. And it takes carbon dioxide from the organs to throw it in the lungs, which in turn expel it to the outside of the body. Now, I want you to evaluate your information. Goodbye.